You're listening to the Reversing Climate Change podcast by the team at Nori, the carbon removal marketplace. This is a show about the innovators and entrepreneurs developing solutions to climate change.
1 degree way, sort of like it's like a wide, like the roads are really wide.
It's a really strange place. I was reading that there's less people in Detroit now than there were 100 years ago, and everything just feels sized incorrectly.
Yeah.
Like the streets are 4 lanes.
They're really big.
They're
really big.
There's no one driving. Every lift I've had has been like a Suburban too, by the way.
Yeah, it's definitely that sort of, even if it was filled with cars, this would be very like roomy and comfy for cars. It's like Carland. It's kind of this story that I've made up in my head.
Carland, it's plausible.
I mean, look, if you look at, for example, like the ramps going down around the hotel, they're like, that's wide enough for like 3 cars, you know? So it's like, you know, you want to be comfy for the cars. It's an interesting place to have a climate conference.
I'm sure it's going to come up. I think people are probably going to want to complain about that.
Let's complain.
Let's complain?
It's a climate change conference after all. That's what we do.
Are we supposed to hope or are we supposed to complain or both?
Oh, we're supposed to actually work on removing carbon from the air.
That's right. We're part of the carbon removal contingent here at TED Countdown in Detroit. I'm told it's Detroit and not Detroit, by the way.
Detroit.
So Tito Jankowski of AirMiners here, back again.
Great to be here, Ross. What's up?
Great to be here. What are you doing? You're doing you've been taking meetings and stuff, but you haven't really told me what the meetings are about. I imagine they're big fancy pants, investors, and making stuff happen, handshakes, kissing babies. What are you doing?
That's it. I was just at this great brainstorming session this morning with Rethinking Removals. They're a new nonprofit, I believe, and they're working on where in carbon removal is kind of what they do needed, and they're working on mapping out kind of gaps and the opportunities in carbon removal. So we're doing that this morning at a co-working space, Venture X in Detroit.
How'd it go? Did you guys solve carbon removal?
Done. It's all taken care of now, Ross.
Are you able to share anything that happened there, or just that it happened?
Oh, it was like a workshop around. We did like a post-it whiteboard exercise. I don't know if I can say who's there and what happened. They didn't say you can't, but it was cool. It was like a bunch of people who are really active in carbon removal talking about like, you know, here's the things that could accelerate carbon removal, or here's the things that we're worried about. And it definitely kind of converged to a lot of the classic things, right? Like getting buyers on board, getting more suppliers. But the takeaway was like, okay, so yeah, like the themes are the same as they've been for the last couple of years, but it's kind of the nuanced pieces of like the snapshot of today, where it's like, okay, there's particular policies, there's particular kind of supplier marketplace relationships that we want to work on. So it's nice. It was, I mean, gosh, talk about kicking off a conference and being like, okay, now I'm like fully up to speed on like the big picture of carbon removal.
Are you energized? Are you hopeful for the future then?
If anything, I'm energized by your eyes. You have really, you really have pretty eyes, Ross. I mean, this is a really cool in-person thing.
Okay. I was just saying that in the early days, I was so tightly wound about doing podcasts only in person because it's way better as body language.
It's just so much better.
And then the pandemic happened. Everything was remote for several years, and now this is the first podcast I've done in person in probably 3 years.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, with compliments like that, why am I not doing this all the time? No one's saying that to me over Zoom.
I get
the fidelity is too low.
Yes.
Wow, I got to sit with that for a second. Thanks, Tito. I got the biggest goofy grin on my face. My God. Okay. Yeah. What's happening here? I know there's a bunch of. I saw Julio, OG Carbon Wrangler himself, Julio Friedman speaking later. Who else? Jonathan Foley. Yeah.
So far today, I've learned Julio Friedman speaking. Actually, I think I knew that yesterday. Kelly Earhart from Vesta is speaking.
Yeah,
I kind of go to conferences and sort of like, you know, you absorb it as you sort of learn the schedule as you're there, because people are like, I'm going to see this person. Oh, okay. So Kelly is speaking. Julio Friedman is speaking.
Al Gore.
Al Gore is on the charts.
On the charts?
Dropping some beats.
I tried to track him down. It's possible he'll be on. But I was just telling Tito, it's really hard to interview the quote-unquote celebrity people because I feel like things that they say have already been polished to death by publicists and people who want to make sure that they get their messaging just right. I feel like that doesn't make for that great of radio. Or you have to do a lot of research to ask questions that are not questions like, so what's like your theory of social change about ESG? And they're like, okay, here's a 40-minute lecture
let
that
me
I've
vomit.
given 100 times.
Yep.
Boring. It's hard to ask good questions there. Al Roker, I saw his speaking.
I saw him on the thing.
Yeah. I don't know. Weatherman. Imagine. I don't know if he's making a climate switch. I don't know what he's up to these days. I guess we'll find out. I saw John Sanchez in the lobby just
Yep,
now.
I just had a sandwich sitting next to John Sanchez.
There you go.
Talking about his new nonprofit with Di Ellis
Yeah.
called... Blanking on the name. I think it starts with a C.
Is he going to allow you to say that? Is that even public yet?
Oh, shit.
Is it?
I
John,
don't
we're
know.
going to check with you.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, John.
Call him up.
Yeah, I would have liked to, but I guess he was running off.
Cascade.
Cascade. Waterfalls. Okay. That's cool.
They're working on open climate interventions.
It's a pretty good area, like open systems.
Yes,
you mean?
open systems climate interventions.
Yeah. John's been interested in that for a while, and I like the work that him and Di have been doing with their research papers that they've published or their blog posts. Yeah, that's a big open question. There's certainly room for innovation there. I mean,
You must have a really broad view of everything happening in carbon removal, Ross. I was just talking with somebody about that. I was like, Ross cuts across so many different topics. It's actually really unique in carbon removal. I mean, people can certainly be like well read in carbon removal, but you're out and talking to everybody about kind of their narrative, their podcast, the story as you do these.
I guess so. I was talking to someone else who's going to be here that I didn't even know was going to be here. She saw that I was here. I don't think she would mind. I'll check with her though. Wendy Owens from Hexus.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
She messaged me on the TED app apparently, which I didn't even know was a thing. But everybody keeps saying, "Oh, the TED app is so good. I saw you on the list," and I'm like, "Okay, what is that?"
Good, yeah. She's saying that people still message her and reach out to her as a response to her being on Reversing Climate Change in 2019.
Wow.
And we hear that a lot from guests. Clearly, it's sticky. We even had guests recently say that they've been on lots of podcasts, but the responses that they get from Reversing Climate Change and reaching out to guests was much higher than other podcasts that they've been on. But yeah, I think I have a pretty wide view. I think in general I am more width than depth in a lot of ways. And I like making weird connections. And that's entertaining for me.
That's
great. Is it valuable to everyone? I don't know.
We're lucky to have you. That's it's if you start looking across a space, like there's very few people that are really kind of cutting specifically across like a lot of different areas. So I get wide, but it's like it's wide but a different facet of it, right? In a sense, like you're talking one-on-one with a very wide range of people. I mean, I spend most of my time talking to startup founders, right? So like I've had like hundreds of conversations with the person starting the company, and you've had like many hundreds of conversations with people kind of from around the whole carbon removal world. It's really an asset to the industry, especially as things continue to grow.
My podcast is an asset. My eyes are an asset. Go on.
Oh yeah, this is like who's interviewing who?
As we stare into Canada high above Detroit.
That's Canada?
Yeah, right.
That bridge?
That's the Ambassador Bridge, yeah. And then right below us is a tunnel.
Can I open this window? Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I took the tunnel years ago to catch a train from Windsor up to Toronto, and it was one of the most intense border crossings I've ever had. The Canadian, I was like just out of college, only had a backpack. They were so suspicious of me, wanted to check everything, get addresses of everyone I knew in Canada. I was like, oh, do you just say that you don't want me?
Wow.
Just tell me you don't want me,
Talk
Canada.
about random sampling, perhaps.
Yeah, I think a young guy with not a lot of luggage with plans that seemed somewhat indeterminate.
Wow.
And I ended up hitchhiking from Montreal into Vermont. So they were right. They knew that my plans were not nearly as fixed as they might like.
Wow, they really pegged it.
Yeah. Whatever. It was a fun trip. God, that was so long ago. So long ago. But yeah, it's the only time I've been here before. And it also struck me as being a very overbuilt, weird. The infrastructure just seems off.
I was thinking about that because, so I don't know when Detroit was built primarily. Do you know when it was? Like, when did all these skyscrapers go up?
I don't know. So turn of the century is Henry Ford, assembly line, Fordism, Taylorism, Model T. That's all happening. I think getting started definitely like Edwardian. They don't say that for American history. That's just British history. Pre-war, pre-World War I, turn of the century. American history, and then I think it just grew from there.
Huh.
So I imagine it is probably like 120 years is probably when it started to take off.
Definitely has a car feel, like I was saying. Like I've been to Paris and
Yeah.
Zurich and New York, and none of those seem like they're alleys, or the alleys are always kind of like they're for people to cram themselves into, and like here it's like every alley is like you can fit a car back there.
And if you go to Lower Manhattan, or even if you go to places like the West Village too, or you're like Bleecker and McDougal, and you're just like, this is made for a smaller town.
Yeah.
A pedestrian town.
Yes, cobblestones.
Detroit does not seem like a pedestrian place at all.
Yeah.
I'm mostly from Phoenix, and it does have kind of a Phoenician vibe to it.
Huh. When was Phoenix kind of built up?
I think it was a post-war city.
Huh.
I think like after World War II, I think is when it really
Are you like
took
a
off.
historian? Like I'm asking all these questions. I have no. If anybody asked me about any city I've been, when was San Francisco built? I'd be like, 1792.
Emperor Norton built it in the 1890s. Yeah, I have a history degree, but
There you go.
there I go, history and philosophy, which should make sense. I didn't earn a philosophy degree. I just did some graduate coursework in philosophy, but yeah.
Wow.
I just know that. I imagine Detroit probably made a bunch of tanks and like deuce and a half trucks in World War II.
Huh,
And
wow.
probably after World War II, it switched over to civilian goods, consumer goods like cars.
Interesting.
But I don't know. Motown. So clearly stuff is happening here through the 50s and 60s.
Wow.
I don't know. I'd like to learn more, but I wish I had more to say about Detroit
Detroit.
right now. Yeah. So carbon removal, what's going to happen here? I feel like there is a strong cohort. I've noticed the conference overall seems kind of decarbonization, kind of in that like there's a lot of like environmental justice and stuff happening in Detroit vibe too. I don't know if you have any impressions on what's happening here now.
On TED Countdown on climate, I think in terms of timeline, in the sense of like I've been saying, we've got 6 more of these until 2030. Similar thing I said at Carbon Unbound in New York. But just when you think about like the cadence of yearly, these yearly things, it's like, hey, like, yeah, this is our chance to get together and make some deals, make some decisions, do some things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do in person. I definitely find myself more responsive to you in person on the podcast. I think in Zoom, I have a bit of like a hold a second to make sure the person's done talking. Here, somehow there's just a lot more data flowing back and forth. So it's just kind of like interrupting is a different thing than it is on Zoom.
I feel much.
So I'm going to interrupt you now.
There you go. And again, and now. Yeah. I feel surprisingly loose about this. I'm wondering, is this going to be great radio, or is this when people do? We should start a podcast, and they listen back. They're like, okay, this is just two buds goofing around in a room.
Out.
But I think it does feel better than Zoom. What was I scared of? I used to prefer this so strongly, and I was such a resistor. But I think this is the way to do it. Why don't I do some more of these? Or maybe we just like to banter.
Yeah.
This is probably
banter,
possibly
right?
a false positive to
Yes,
you.
yes. What do you want to talk about?
I want to hear about what you're doing here. Like
Cool.
You're clearly taking meetings. AirMiners has changed since last time we had you on. You were just starting to talk about the fund that you had raised. You're changing the way AirMiners is no longer just a community. Are you allowed to talk about stuff like that, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah. When's this going out?
When would you like it to go out?
Let's send it out whenever it's ready, because I just realized we're good. We have all our things out. We have our press releases going on Wednesday, just tomorrow, I've been told.
Oh.
So, yeah, we're good.
Wow. Okay. What's the press release going to say? I guess this will come out after that. But.
So, we've been looking at this thing for a long time in the sense of that there's this capital gap for early stage startup companies.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 95 freaking startups go through AirMiners Launchpad.
Man, that's such an illustrious list too. It's impressive.
In 2 years, right? It really speaks to like
Wow.
it's go time for carbon removal.
Yeah.
Had 95 teams come through. They've raised $90 million of venture capital and grants. Isn't that crazy? Like,
super
go
cool.
carbon removal, go AirMiners, go 95 startup companies. And we just kept seeing this, like, as these companies are getting funded, obviously the majority of funding goes to like a very few companies. But there's, when you're starting a new concept, there's a gap of, a couple $100,000, $1 million. And we want to figure out how do we fill that gap. And so what we're announcing is the AirMiners Kiloton Fund. So specifically what we're doing is we are buying carbon removal credits from early stage companies instead of equity. But it's basically a way of investing money into a company as they start to get going.
So you're going to be their first customers, and then are you recouping by selling those credits later?
Yep, that's the idea. We're buying the credits now, and we'll sell them. We'll sell them later.
Does anyone else do it like that?
Not yet. To me, it definitely this model seems inevitable in carbon removal in that sense. The idea that you would be able to finance your company based on your future product sales just seems like this is how it's going to happen. AirMiners is doing it because we're in a good position to, especially at these very early stages of a company, to be there for it. But it has that feeling of inevitability where it's just like, yeah, like all these companies are making the same product, carbon removal credits. There's got to be some way to finance them, rather than equity sales or rather than offtake agreements, which are a very powerful market signal, but they're not actually cash today. And so, again, working with 95 companies, we just saw this capital gap and we said, well, how can we solve this, or how can we create a solution for this? And that's what this Kiloton Fund is, which is a test pilot for the Megaton Fund. So the numbers, the words kind of tell you a little bit about where this is.
The next one is maybe an order of magnitude bigger or much more. Yeah.
You can speculate on what that name means.
Okay. Yeah. Offtake agreements. We've referenced them on the show before, but might be useful to listeners to have that refreshed here. So what signifies an offtake agreement?
Offtake agreement is fundamentally it's, hey, if you deliver carbon credits or when you deliver carbon credits, we'll be here to buy them at this particular price. So Frontier is well known for its offtake agreements. It also does pre-purchase agreements, which are different, and sometimes those two things get mixed together. But offtake agreements are a promise to pay in the future upon delivery.
And you've chosen to do something closer to the pre-purchase model. Why?
So closing the funding gap in carbon removal is a problem. So that's what we ultimately looked at. How do we build a solution to that? And so every solution that we looked at always had to be, how do we get cash to startup companies today? And so that kind of narrowed in our scope of like, that's the problem. So therefore the solution needs to be cash today.
So you're saying that these offtake agreements are structured settlements, but you need cash now. You ever see those commercials on daytime TV?
Is that a thing?
It's like, you have a structured settlement but need cash now. So I said it with such deadpan seriousness that
yes. Say it 10 times fast. That'll be the radio commercial.
You didn't like stay home sick from school and watch bad TV?
I'm
Jerry
sure I
Springer
did.
Okay. No. Just young howly Tito.
Yeah, that's it.
Growing up.
That's it. Didn't have a TV at those times, but I was more of a reading books, and I don't think law ads made themselves into books.
I don't even have a TV. Just read books.
That's it.
So the companies that have already passed through, though, are they being considered for these this fund, or is it like companies that are now going through Launchpad, and how's it work?
Yeah, we're keeping it separate in the sense that we're not only buying from companies that have gone through the Launchpad accelerator. So we're open to buying from any startup company that's working on removing carbon from the sky can apply for this program. We're going to be announcing more of the details in a couple weeks.
How are you going to sell them and when?
So we're aiming to, in a sense, we want to keep it really simple, right? We're getting these credits so that we can sell them to buyers in the future without having to do too much on the market making side. And so, open to buyers. We're putting out the press release. Buyers who want to buy tons from us can email us at tons@airminers.org. But yeah, we're in terms of the sales side of it. I think we need to be good at it. But really, like the part where we're really well positioned to work with startup companies is more on the startup side, obviously.
It seems like it's something that you're doing in part of a full suite of services. Like these companies could potentially partner with some of the other resellers or marketplaces within carbon removal, but they're not going to get the mentorship and the connections and the sort of value adds that AirMiners is known for.
That's it. Yeah, we want to help get you plugged into the whole ecosystem. Actually, Stacy from Shopify is on the press release saying what a swell thing this is.
She says, "Gee golly, this is swell."
Has she been on this?
Has Stacy been on this? I don't think so.
You got to get her. She's like totally.
Yeah.
She's really good.
No, she is good. We should. Stacy, we're coming for you, as Christoph used to say.
That sound I made, that was kind of like a judo chop, kind of like right to the point, really clear. Oh, she's got a great background and just like, anyway, she'll come and tell her story and.
Wow,
it's happening.
I've never had someone give a note to the audience for how to interpret their their gesticulation.
I'm used to Zoom. I live on Zoom these days. So.
You live on Zoom? Yeah, it feels better, doesn't it? I prefer this human interaction. Do you remember when the pandemic started and everyone said in the future it's going to be nothing but Zoom? We're all going to do whatever and be far away.
Yeah, I'm pretty sold on Zoom. I mean, for one, on Zoom I wouldn't have to explain my hand gestures.
But you still would, because no one's watching the video. Like, who are you? Still, they're still only listening.
Oh, huh?
Yeah, this is fallacious thinking.
You're only allowed to listen.
You're only allowed to listen.
Blind yourself with a Nori podcast.
Tito's judo chops and other pearls of wisdom. Okay, what were you saying that was actually probably important?
Well, in terms of buyers, they're able to come and get in conversation with AirMiners about what we're buying and how we're looking at selling it.
Who's going to do that? Do you know yet?
In terms of buyers?
Or no, who on your team is going to be selling these and making these deals?
Yeah, so it's the three of us, Jason, Adina, and I. I'm the one kind of leading the fund side, but ultimately setting up the application process, interviewing teams. We're going to use a lot of what we learned from interviewing. We've interviewed hundreds of teams. We've had 800 applications for our Launchpad Accelerator to date. Maybe it's 900. It's just like it's an incredible amount of people that have come in and said, "Hey, I've got something and I need your help," or "Can you help us?" And some of them were like, "Yeah, you know what, we can't help you." But the ones that we accept are like, "Okay, they meet the criteria that we set, and we believe that we can expedite their journey."
How are you delivering compliments to me about being someone with a very wide view of carbon removal? I don't think I've spoken to 900 companies, 800 or 900 companies. That's probably as wide as it gets.
It says it's very, very, very wide in like carbon removal startup world. Yeah. Just doesn't extend to beyond that. It's like in terms of policy, in terms of other stuff. But yeah, startups, like we've talked to them. Like Jason, Adi, and I have probably individually talked to more startups than, well, anyone on earth besides the other two. It's pretty wild. Yeah, and it just gives you so much in terms of just like being able to just see where somebody's at and just understand what is it that what's their goal, what's their plan to get there, and where are they stuck. That's the three questions. They're not like mystery questions. That's what we ask you in the application and the interview. And it really does give a sense of where somebody's at. What's your goal? What's your plan for getting there? And where are you stuck? Everybody's stuck somewhere, right? If you say, "I'm not stuck anywhere," it's like, well, why are you here? I'm stuck somewhere. I'm stuck in Detroit.
Hey. Wow. I mean, the easy podcasting move here is to ask you those questions, but maybe I'll come back.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, given that you are seeing things at such great volumes, what trends are you seeing that maybe are not currently the mainstream wisdom within carbon removal? Because we all have our path dependencies here. Let's break us out of one.
The beauty of talking to startups, which basically there's nothing such as a startup, but there is like the beauty of talking to a person or two people or three people that say they're starting a company, is you get this just really clean snapshot of like one person's view and their plan for what they're going to do about it. That's one of the things I love about working with these early companies is you get this snapshot. Also, you get that from talking with students too. Students seem to have they're not trying to paint too much of like a complete narrative. They're just kind of like, boom, here's what we're doing. one of the things that came up was this isn't a business idea, but you talked about like what are the bigger concepts. I'm now curious about like are we categorizing carbon removal companies in a way that's effective towards accelerating what's needed and where the gaps are. So, for example, or at least if you look back, like traditionally, we categorize companies by how the carbon is captured. So we capture it's direct air capture, it's soil, it's trees, it's enhanced rock weathering, it's ocean-based carbon removal. So many of those like really come with this thick layer of capture. And if you think about the capture step, it's like, I don't know, it's a couple seconds, it's, a month, right? Like Climeworks, when they capture carbon, I don't know, they sit on it for a couple hours or a couple days or something. But then ultimately, like it comes down to storage. And so I talked with a group of students at, I think they're students. Gosh, I thought they were doing like a student internship. Maybe I got that wrong. But they were working on kind of different questions in carbon removal, and they were like, what do you think about categorizing things like this? I was like, that's super brilliant. Their one was categorizing based on verification method. So like, what if you reorganized all carbon removal classifications by what is the verification method of this removal? Anyway, you asked like what's a hot topic in carbon removal, or like an emerging topic in carbon removal.
Yeah, I want you. I mean, I like that topic too, but break one of these conventional nuggets that everyone has taken for granted at this point, and that maybe no longer holds true.
Yep.
I know it's kind of a tough question, but do you have one like that?
Oh, well, that's what I just said, right? Isn't it?
To recategorize based on...
Yeah, recategorize based on verification method or storage method rather than capture method. Another is, this is another great insight. This one was from a startup founder. They came in and they just happened to say a phrase that was like, and obviously since Climeworks is an integrator, and like, it just, for me, I was like, I'd always thought Climeworks is really like this, startup that had some kind of like really core technology they were building a company around. And at this stage, I mean, I got to visit Climeworks in Zurich, and it's like, whoa, they're really pulling together. They're like really at the integrator layer where they're pulling together all these just the whole planet to build these direct air capture systems.
I'm interested to know what it's like for them spiritually, I guess is the word I'm looking for, given that they're DAC 1.0 and they have all these DAC 2.0 people coming around saying DAC 1.0, so inefficient, not nearly as modular as we need. Like, you're just nodding. No judo chop, just nods. Yeah.
Well, I get it. I mean, it's like, those are all great questions and discussions to have. It's like, what ultimately it's about how to remove billions of tons of carbon from the air. Is cost the only variable? What is the value of modularity? What does modularity even mean, right? Like if you have a shipping container size unit, is that small enough? Do you need like a desktop-based system?
Sampo Tukiainen told me that modularity could be, I don't want to misquote you, Sampo, but could literally be as big as an industrial facility. It almost does not correlate to size. Modular does not have to be a window DAC unit.
Yeah, so maybe modular is a word we should dig more into, it being like, okay, what do you mean by modular? Like how much does this thing weigh?
You sound so
something?
smart asking a question like that.
Yeah? Wow.
We really need to get closer to what modularity actually means here. What about like these categorization questions? One of the big gauche dichotomies that people don't like anymore, nature-based and engineered, that's pretty far out. I almost never hear anyone talk like that anymore.
Oh, I hear that often in the sense of like kind of people on who are maybe newer to carbon removal. But then when you start to listen, it does get used often.
Oh.
Nature-based systems, engineering-based systems. I've just... For what it's worth, I have found those terms less useful than durability, permanence, cost, those sorts of things.
Do you think that carbon removal should include less permanent types of carbon storage, or do you think that only permanent carbon removal should be qua carbon removal?
So permanent... Okay, so here's another thing. This is from some emails recently I've exchanged. sounds so fancy. I'm on my phone. No, but
On
like
the toilet.
so yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
An issue with permanence and permanent is like permanent is a binary thing. Something is permanent or not permanent.
True,
Any
yeah.
binary words in carbon removal are likely less effective than kind of more
Conditional.
full spectrum kind of
Yeah.
variables. So permanence is a nice one because it's like, well, let's talk about the permanence of something. But the issue is, and this is a radio test kind of thing, permanence and permanent they sound the same freaking thing. So I've been using durable. Durable and durability don't have that same like kind of, they're easier to hear and they kind of don't imply so much of like a black and white kind of thing. It's more of a spectrum. What's the durability? It doesn't answer the question you're actually asking, but yeah.
I mean, the way that I've heard it put, the difference between durability and permanence is that durability also takes reversal risk into account, where permanence, something could be permanent if it is not reversed.
Wow.
But durability also has this like, is it long lasting and unlikely to be reversed?
Huh. Interesting.
But then again, there's no dictionary definition for this either. And so I hear people use these terms. Maybe they're using it incorrectly. I've probably used them incorrectly at various points too. Or maybe it's less of a distinction than it needs to be. I'm not sure.
Yeah. First, I didn't know about the difference between durability and permanence in that sense, that there's a kind of another
these are
layer
all
to it.
just things that people made up and wrote on the internet enough times, or maybe it came out in a scientific paper. I don't even know.
That's it. I mean, look, going back to the Kiloton Fund, like one of the beauties of it is we have the fund. We've raised $250,000 to go out and make these purchases, and like having money and going out to make purchases, it really does kind of force like, okay, this is a real, this is a real conversation. It's a real discussion. Some of the other kind of more philosophical aspects of carbon removal. I mean, one of the benefits of, again, having an accelerator program working with 95 startup companies, you really get into, okay, what is your actual problem? Like, what's your problem this week? Like, what's the thing that you're stuck on this week? And it's not like, what are things that you might be stuck on? It's like, you get really into, like, are you stuck on this? And if anybody's out there is like really struggling with durability versus permanence or like these other terms, I'd love to hear from you. Tito at AirMiners.org. Yeah, just again, like when you're out doing things, you kind of is I don't know, a lot of stuff does kind of fall on the priority list in terms of like, yeah, like it is good to get clear on the language you use, and like, is anybody actually like blocked by this right now? Maybe, but otherwise, maybe not.
I mean, that was one of the things that Nori, one of the best criticisms to levy against us has been that we've always been too far in the future, where we were solving problems that were several years ahead of schedule, which when the market catches up with us, like, look out. I think that's going to be a time. So now we've had to go back and look for some of these intermediate steps of what's actually blocking the industry right now. That's a good question to anchor to.
Yeah, it is. Solving things or like looking at what's actually blocked right now it really does have a way of just, it clears out, like there are a lot of possible problems that carbon removal will face. Yeah. Infinite possible problems. Whereas if you look at what problems are right now, it just has a way of like, it cuts through a lot of stuff to just get down to like, okay, what's the thing actually on your mind right now? Like no judgment, like what is actually on your mind? It really does just kind of like, okay, it gets to it.
All right, well, physician, heal thyself. And what's blocking you, Tito?
What's blocking me at this moment? What's blocking me? Thing I can't mention on the show, but that's like let me think about other things that are blocking me. Well, we're making this announcement tomorrow, Wednesday. And so by the time you hear this will be already out. And we have a sign up for people to get connected to the Kiloton Fund. You can go to airminers.org/kiloton. And what's blocking it as of now, well, since we haven't announced this, we have 0 people that have signed up. But once this goes live, I would love to connect to people who are interested in selling carbon removal credits to this new fund.
Do they have to be a certain size or age?
that's part of what making it real is like, okay, let's go and figure that out. In terms of our requirements, not really. I think it's the deal and discount that we're going to be sharing more about is going to be most appealing to like early stage companies.
When are you looking to sell these and to start having your own revenue?
That's going to be a couple years down the road, and it's going to depend on what we buy specifically. But we're not looking to we're not going to be selling carbon immediately.
Are you? I'm trying to wrap my head around how to ask this question. Are you anticipating prices for carbon removal are generally going to trend upwards, and thus there will be an ability to get that difference, that delta is going to be captured by you and I don't know. By you guys?
I'm not planning on this, and we haven't modeled that like so much that the price changes rapidly. I think Bloomberg has a nice chart that's like prices are going to peak around 2030, 2032, and then fall. So they're going to peak around $225, 2032, and then they're going to descend to $100 by 2050. So I'm a fan of that model in the sense that it says, prices are going to go up through 2030, and then in the sense that there's just like a massive supply crunch, and then after that there'll be enough supply that we can start to work our way down the price curve.
I'm really curious. We should probably do an entire show about this, but about how offsetting claims are changing in a post-Delta lawsuit world. Have you tracked that at all?
Delta lawsuit?
Yeah, Delta Airlines got sued for false representation of their ESG, mostly for using not so good offsets. And I think that's probably going to be a boon. It will either be a boon for carbon removal, or companies are just going to change the way they characterize cheap things as being like climate positive, but no longer go for neutral or objective claims. They'll be like wigglier, or both. Like both of those things could happen. I think it'll be bifurcated probably. I don't know if you thought about it, but it sounds like I just dropped it on you.
Like Tom and Jerry.
Speculate on this thing
Tom
that you haven't heard about until right now.
I mean, when I look, we absolutely need a working market for offsets. We absolutely need a working market for removals. Any issues faced by the removals market need to get fixed. Like we need an offtake or offset market that people are willing to pay for. We need a removals market that people are willing to pay for. I don't think it's in sense of like, is it just that people are going to switch from offsets to removals? I don't really. I was going to say I don't really think that's going to happen, but what I'm more saying is we absolutely need a working offset. Darn it. We need an offset market, and we absolutely need a removals market. And yeah, there's some issues in the offset market. Somebody needs to go get to work on those. There's an opportunity there for somebody to build a working, to raise the bar for offsets.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, are we going to see carbon removals take off? Are we going to see companies finally say, we're actually trying to get to net zero and we're going to buy these several years in advance, future vintage carbon removals that are very expensive, at least an order of magnitude, sometimes several orders of magnitude more expensive than offsets they've bought previously? Is that going to happen? Beyond just the Microsofts and Shopifys of the world?
I think that's a big question. That's a big question in carbon removal. I always go back to like the inevitable, right? In the sense of getting to 2 degrees of warming scenarios, getting to 1.5 degree of warming scenarios requires massive amounts of decarbonization, and also requires $1 trillion per year roughly of carbon removal as a market. Who buys it, what the pathway looks like to that. We get to discover that together. I'd like to, more corporates to come online and be participating in these things in a way that makes sense to them. For there to be a second generation of more and more buyers joining programs like Frontier, new things like Frontier popping up. Some buyers are going to want to go after that more catalytic bit where they're paying up front or they're kind of being part of the innovation story. Other buyers are going to say, look, when you deliver the carbon, then we'll buy it. Great. They all have a role to play in creating this or into discovering this market. I think that discovering speaks more to the inevitability of carbon removal than kind of like a let's see if it happens approach. Which just in my model of carbon removal, it's that it is going to happen. And it's a matter of our path to it versus like is it going to happen or not? I think if you really take a big like universal picture, I think if you look at any stable planetary system has some kind of economic system for balancing its atmosphere. I know UFOs are in the news, so we can talk to them. But yeah, I mean, just if you really look at any stable planetary system with an active civilization, they've got, for lack of a better word, a carbon market.
What? If you look at any planetary system, they have a carbon market?
Yeah, if you just sort of come at carbon removal as from an inevitability standpoint, rather than a will there be more buyers? Inevitably there will be, because because creating a stable planet it's a requirement.
They're not just like the Borg and they have no individual consciousness, but they all just work for the greater good and have solved the problem without money and markets. And
like maybe there's a way of doing that, and I bet in our language we would draw a circle around it and say that's a market.
Yeah, she's actually like paradigm blind. You're just like, okay, that's what that is. I think it's time for us to start going to the conference.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Thanks for hanging, Tito. It was fun.
Good seeing you, Ross.
Thank you so much for listening. If you could please subscribe and give us a great rating and review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, that'd be much appreciated. It helps us get our content out to more people. You can sign up for our newsletter at nori.com, follow us on social media, and we will catch you next time.